In North Korea, deserters are executed by firing squad. However, this North Korean soldier had been planning to escape the country all along. His name is Kyunom. Now, he crawled through a ventilation duct to reach outside the camp and passed through the tunnel he had dug beneath the barbed wire. He entered the mine-filled military restricted zone to scout the area, placing branches as markers at each mine's location and carefully marking their positions on his map.
Now close to the border here.
Suddenly, there was an explosion. It turned out that a wild boar had triggered a landmine. He had to return to the barracks quickly and lie in bed, pretending to be asleep to avoid being discovered. In order to escape, Kyunom spent every night preparing step by step, persevering for 10 long years. All he needed was the right moment, and he could finally realize his dream of defecting from North Korea. At that moment, a comrade told Kyunom that there would be a heavy rainstorm within the next 2 days. If the rain washed away the soil, the landmines would be exposed on the surface and the minefield would be reorganized. This meant that the branches he had used to mark the landmines would no longer be effective. At that moment, a wild boar that had triggered a landmine became their meal. Unfortunately, the roasted wild boar was discovered by the officers. Not only was Kyunom scolded and whipped, but the boar became a feast for the officers, who enjoyed it with drinks and meat. This inhumane oppression by the regime only strengthened Kyunom's determination to escape. Escaping from North Korea to South Korea is the aspiration of the awakened for freedom. To ensure a successful escape, Kyunom originally planned to act before the storm, but his comrade Dong-hyuk disrupted his plan. Comrade Dong-hyuk questioned him, "Are you planning to escape before the storm?" Because the rain might cause the landmines to shift their positions. When Kyunom denied his words, his comrade replied that he already knew everything. However, Dong-hyuk had no intention of exposing Kyunom's actions because he too was someone who longed to escape from North Korea. That night, a sudden alarm sounded. Kyunom looked towards his comrade's bed, but he was nowhere to be found. His comrade had also stolen his map and compass. Kyunom found Dong-hyuk near the barbed wire. Dong-hyuk asked him where the dug tunnel was. Kyunom urged his comrade to go back, saying it wasn't the right time to escape. But Dong-hyuk replied that going back now would also be a dead end. Unfortunately, the operation failed, and they were eventually discovered and brought back to the camp. As deserters, they were faced with North Korea's brutal punishment. To Kyunom's surprise, his comrade Dong-hyuk took all the blame, while Kyunom became the hero who captured the deserter. After his promotion, Kyunom encountered the vehicle transporting Dong-hyuk during his escape. He lied, claiming he was on a mission, and got into the vehicle. On the vehicle, Kyunom attempted to seize the driver's pistol to rescue Dong-hyuk. At that moment, a chaotic fight broke out among the 4 people inside the vehicle. Just as the driver aimed the gun at him, a bullet pierced through the driver's head, causing the vehicle to overturn. The vehicle crashed into a roadside billboard, rolling several times before finally coming to a stop. Kyunom immediately pulled his comrade out of the vehicle while searching for the lost map. Just as Kyunom spotted the map not far away and moved to retrieve it, several bullets were fired at him. After learning of his escape, the national security captain led a team in pursuit and tracked him to this location. With it being difficult to avoid the gunfire, Kyunom came up with a plan. He smeared the blood from the ground across his face. He pretended to have been shot dead, successfully deceiving the national security captain who was watching through binoculars. He took advantage of the pause in gunfire and quickly ran toward the map nearby. The national security forces, realizing what had happened, began firing at him relentlessly. At that moment, Dong-hyuk quickly followed Kyunom, sprinting alongside him. The two sprinted under the pursuit of several jeeps, all while dodging a barrage of gunfire. Up ahead was a pond, and without hesitation, they jumped in. Fortunately, they both survived. Just as Kyunom woke up, he sensed someone approaching them. As he picked up a rock to strike, it was kicked away, and a pistol was pointed at his head. The one holding the gun was a woman, clearly the leader. Soon after, about 7 or 8 others, all armed, surrounded them. Most of them were women. It seemed they were a group of resistance militia. It turned out that the leader had been searching for her brother, who had been taken by government forces. Coincidentally, Dong-hyuk knew where her brother was being held. Just as they were planning the rescue, the national security forces arrived nearby to search for them. The national security captain listened to the voices over the radio, directing the operation remotely. With his sharp hearing, he instructed his men to stop and look up to see what was above them. His men spotted a small hole above the cave's ceiling. Sensing something unusual, the captain directed his troops to search in that direction, while the resistance militia hid right beneath their feet. They didn't dare make a sound, but a child suddenly stepped on a branch, breaking it, and the noise caught the attention of a soldier. All the soldiers started moving toward them, and just as a confrontation was about to happen, Yearn fired a shot into the air from a distance. His action drew the attention of the national security forces, and the captain ordered all soldiers to surround the two of them. With the front blocked, Yearn and Dong-hyuk had no choice but to sprint in the opposite direction. They hadn't run far when Dong-hyuk was shot in the thigh. Yearn immediately turned back and helped his comrade continue their escape. They could no longer run quickly, so they had no choice but to hide in the bushes. They were now surrounded by the national security forces, and the encirclement was gradually tightening. At this critical moment, intense gunfire erupted from behind them. It turned out that the resistance group had launched an attack to cover for them, engaging the government forces in direct combat. Intense gunfight erupted between the two sides in the jungle. The government's forces had their attention fully drawn to the rebels, pursuing them in that direction. The female leader had achieved her goal and immediately ordered a retreat. The national security captain was furious with his foolish subordinates. Yearn and Dong-hyuk managed to escape safely. However, they must return to the military camp, as it is the only route they had prepared for escaping from North Korea to South Korea. Dong-hyuk accidentally tumbled down a hillside, almost exposing their identities. The clever Yearn quickly blended into the group and hurriedly put a helmet on Dong-hyuk. Just like that, they managed to slip into the assembled unit undetected. This assembly was organized by the National Security Department to increase manpower in the search for them. At this moment, they secretly slipped back into the military camp's kitchen. The sounds coming from the kitchen caught the attention of a nearby officer, making him suspicious. They poured a bucket of gasoline at the kitchen entrance and ignited it, causing the first group of soldiers that entered to be blown away by the explosion. Meanwhile, they had already escaped through the ventilation duct. As Yearn crawled through the tunnel beneath the barbed wire, he realized that his comrade hadn't followed. Dong-hyuk hadn't crossed under the barbed wire. It seemed he was searching for something. It turned out that Dong-hyuk was searching for the ruby gift he had for his mother. Just as he found the ruby, misfortune struck. He was caught in the spotlight of the guard tower. When Yearn returned, it was already too late. Dong-hyuk had been shot by the sniper from the guard tower. Yearn fired back at the guard tower, retaliating against the sniper. He used the brief window of time to help his wounded comrade through the tunnel beneath the barbed wire, and they emerged from the exit. Dong-hyuk entrusted the necklace to Yearn, asking him to deliver it to his mother. Just after he finished speaking, he was shot dead. At that moment, the national security captain aimed the sniper rifle at Yearn. They fired almost simultaneously, but Yearn's shot precisely hit the spotlight, plunging the area into darkness. Yearn then skillfully shot and destroyed each spotlight with pinpoint accuracy, leaving the national security captain stunned by his remarkable shooting skills. When Yearn raised his gun to face off with the national security captain again, he realized his gun was out of bullets. At that moment, Yearn was shot, but fortunately, the bullet only shattered the compass he was carrying. The national security captain believed Yearn had been killed. However, without the compass, Yearn also lost his sense of direction for escape. Being clever, he used the strength of the radio signals to determine his direction and ran toward the minefield. However, due to the rain, the markings he had made in the minefield were now gone, rendering the map useless. No matter the obstacles, he refused to give up. Yearn relied on his instincts and ventured into the minefield. He ran swiftly, from night until dawn, charging forward without hesitation toward the land of freedom in his heart. He wanted to escape this land of oppression and begin a new life for himself. After running for a while longer, Yearn reached a swampy area. He struggled through the swamp, grabbing onto branches and pulling himself out. Upon reaching the borderline, he saw South Korean patrol soldiers in the distance. At that moment, he accidentally stepped on a landmine, while the national security captain aimed his gun at the back of his head. The national security captain couldn't understand why Kyunom was so determined to escape from North Korea, while he himself considered himself a loyal hero to his country. He told Kyunom, "The South isn't necessarily a paradise. Someone like you will still have nothing when you get there." Kyunom believed that although the South might not be a paradise, at least it offered freedom. Kyunom released the pressure on the landmine beneath his feet, surrendering his fate to the heavens. The absence of an explosion from the landmine left the national security captain a bit dazed, and he began to waver on whether to let this deserter go. Kyunom quickly ran toward the entrance of the passage leading south. The hesitant national security captain fired a shot, hitting Kyunom in the leg. Just as Kyunom was about to cross the borderline, the national security captain fired again, hitting him. Driven by his unwavering belief, Kyunom reached out to touch the borderline, while the national security captain hesitated, contemplating whether to fire again. At that moment, South Korean soldiers arrived, and Kyunom's hand touched the borderline. The national security captain finally gave up the chase and turned back. The story ends here. Thank you all for watching.